Hello, class. As we begin Chapter 10, we'll be exploring warehouse management. Warehousing is much more than storage and, setting up, just putting things in a location and waiting for them to be needed. It's a strategic element of logistics that impacts transportation, inventory management, and customer satisfaction. Primarily, it's very essential in taking care of the customer. And with e-commerce, it's reshaping how goods flow. Warehouses are no longer just, a cost center, but now they're competitive difference makers. So one example would be, one we've gone over a few different times is Amazon's fulfillment network. Excuse me. That's a great example where warehousing strategy is directly tied to customer expectations of 1 day and 2 day shipping, even same day shipping, or, order it now, you have it by the time you wake up in the morning. So, welcome to the Galveston College Distribution Center. We're using that as just a backdrop to begin this chapter study. As you read through the chapter, you'll see a lot of these terms and conditions and how we set up a warehouse, how do we manage what comes in and out, and how everything flows together. So let's take a tour through the Galveston College Distribution Center. Of course, we always go over our learning objectives. Our learning objectives are very important, and this chapter give the ability to identify the role of warehousing in logistics. To help understand major facility types. We'll compare public, private, contract, and multi-client warehouses. We'll also look at some design considerations such as a slotting, aisle width, automation, and as we wrap up, we'll study some operational issues, that are related to productivity, safety, always critical, hazmat, and security. And we'll close with a brief case study that illustrates real-world decision making. Walmart redesigned distribution center layouts to prioritize, a lot of rapid growth and cross-stock operations, and it gave them an edge in retail logistics when everything was still primarily, brick and mortar. And as we continue to move forward, we saw Amazon take it to the next step. So keep an eye on this as you learn what we're going to be focusing on these objectives. So if you get in a position where you're asked to redesign or set up or find efficiencies to be more effective, there's some core concepts we're introducing in this chapter. And we look at this, we look at the role of warehousing, right? What is it? It balances the mismatches in production and consumption. For instance, products may be made in bulk. They can be stored and released gradually to meet the demand. It can also reduce transportation costs, by consolidating shipments, and it provides security against raw material shortages. It's and the regrouping function, accumulating, allocating, assorting, and sorting ensures the supply chains remain flexible and responsible. As you look at the diagram, we go direct from producer to the retailer for longer haul transportation. It's at the producer, it's a long trip, it goes straight to the retailer. And then you have the secondary option, which is like, well, it comes from a producer to a warehousing facility, much like what you see with Amazon and even HEB, Walmart, a lot of producers, medical companies, med device does it, hospitals do it. You start to see where hospital distribution centers pop up around the local area in Houston, particularly. You'll see a Methodist distribution center just on the side of what is that, on Beltway 8 near Cullen and 288, and then a little further down there's another Memorial Hermann a little closer to the north side, all being set up so products that are coming into the hospital come to that warehousing facility, then they go to the different hospitals. Here it's retailer A, B, or C, but they can be located throughout the Houston area. So keep in mind when you're driving around the loop on a leisurely Sunday afternoon to look around and say, where is that? Is that a distribution center? Is that a warehouse? What kind of role is that building serving? And just keep in mind, frequently a good example is automobile manufacturers. They keep steel on hand in warehouses, so production lines are never shut down during raw material shortages. These are some lessons learned that are particularly uh, useful right now. And in one example, another example is the Daikin Manufacturing Center in Northwest Houston. I guess they're outside of Houston, but one of the things when we set up the production facility at Daikin, we wanted to make sure that we had raw material available. At that time, we were looking at some raw material aluminum challenges. So what we had worked with our production teams to say, hey, let's find ways to store this. We need to find locations to store this around Houston. And fortunately, they'd had some excess warehouse space because everything was being consolidated to the main manufacturing facility in Waller County. So they started saying, okay, we're going to start staging areas for this raw material, keep this aluminum on hand. So this little diagram just simplifies it a bit and makes it easier to understand that it's long haul. Sometimes it's right to a warehousing. You can cut the trips down. You can put large shipments to a warehouse facility and make a few more and keep everything moving on the shorter hauls. So as we discussed, we're going to go through some types of warehousing facilities. Well, we have a diagram of this. What does that look like? Well, that's more like a cross-dock operation. Material comes in one side and goes out the other side, and so quite frequently FedEx runs this example very well, UPS, where everything's coming in, being picked up, and a lot of times before it even arrives at the facility, it's already earmarked and tagged to go to the truck to go on the outbound location, or for consolidation to flight to regional airports if they're in Texas, it may be driven, or if it needs to fly to Tennessee. I believe that's where they're in. Nashville is one of their big sorting facilities. So, the different types of facilities, they serve different purposes, of course. And warehouses always want to maximize as much space as possible. Distribution centers want the rapid movement. And fulfillment centers, they're the ones usually close to e-commerce orders. They may be a little smaller and a little more spread out around a big region. Houston has quite a few for Amazon. You'll see some smaller distribution centers. They're the fulfillment centers. It comes in, goes out with a very short time. It's the cross-docking facilities that primarily minimize storage. Like in this drawing here, you don't see, there's not a lot of space for stacking stuff up. It's usually in and out, in and out. And cross docking is a very popular motto. One with my own experience set up the Halliburton North American Distribution Center. It was set up as a cross dock. The target was not to have material sitting there greater than 48 hours. So it took a lot of coordination effort through our purchasing, procurement, planning departments, import export control, and so it made cross docking very beneficial. And it took a lot of effort. We had an army of logistics and supply chain people that made sure the trucks arrived, were unloaded, and material was taken to where it needed to be staged for loading. As much as possible, we try to get it in and out the same day, but sometimes we had it as much as 48 hours. The target was nothing more than 48 hours, and we had metrics set in place to make sure that we were successful. So keep that in mind if you're looking at types of warehouses, what you want to use them for, and how you're going to make it happen. So we're going to go through a few slides of what exactly each one is. Public warehousing. Well, public warehouses, they're pretty straightforward. They're flexible. They're low cost storage without a big investment. They're ideal when interest rates are high, or when you're entering a new market. You may not be sure about the volume you may need to have. So, they handle personal regulatory compliance. They do a lot of work for you. You can get product in and out where you don't have to deal with the headaches, but they allow their own army of logistics supply chain people taking care of these issues. And that provide some value added services, what we call, repackaging. They'll take RMAs that send stuff, take stuff back and get it back to the producer or the manufacturing centers that are associated with you, and for they'll consolidate sizes for you, which is very helpful. They're the distribution centers in public warehousing that make a big difference and save a lot of money. One thing you're gonna run into in public warehousing is you're gonna get the square footage you pay for, and sometimes they may have contracts with other partners there where they can reduce your space if you're not using it and give it to someone else. And a lot of times that has happened. I've seen it with in the oil and gas industry with Halliburton and Schlumberger. We were using a public warehouse where we both had products stored, and when we weren't using a lot of space, we found out when we did need to use it that they had given it up to our competitor because their volume was higher and they needed the space and they were willing to pay a premium for it. So it's got a good benefit when there's some unpredictable forces out there, but if you get in a position where you need space, it's hard to really grow it a lot sometimes. You may be restricted. And then the other is private warehousing. A lot of companies, I think that's one of the benefits that Amazon does is, they own all the square footage that they have in their distribution fulfillment centers and warehouses. One of the negatives of that or drawbacks is the high cost, right? You got to spend the money to get that footprint, and it offers the benefit is you control the layout. You can do whatever you want in that building. You have all the access. You control all the processes. So if you're high quality control, you can really make it a very effective and efficient operation where you're never going to be concerned about. Well, we show it in the warehouse, but we're not in charge of it, so we're not sure. One example of that was at Schlumberger. We use a third-party warehousing company, and when we would show it in the system, we would look for it, and they it wouldn't be there when we call them and say, "Have this delivered tomorrow," or "Have this delivered today." We can't find it. What shows in the system shows it was delivered yesterday, and then usually that created problems. But that's a public one. Our private, we own it, we control it, our processes, we know it's there because of, if you're a good operation, you'll have the accountability, and it's very good. It just costs a little more. Uh, it's good to have private warehousing if you have, like, stable demand. What is stable demand? That means you've got a steady amount of product coming in and out, and you can say, I need this much space this many months out of the year, and so you're never worried about running out of space as long as you've got a good projection and a stable production plan. You can see what's coming in and coming out, and you can move things appropriately. And again, it's just high cost, and if your demand shifts in the wrong direction, or if you do a merger, some things happen that this could negatively impact you. We've had an instance where we took over a company's production line and we moved all their product to ours, and because we shut down their public warehousing and brought it to private, and we had to put stuff out in the parking lot. So it created a few problems for a little while, but we had to recover with some workarounds. So their private warehousing is a good option, but you're going to spend more money. The next one is, excuse me, contract warehousing. Well, what is contract warehousing? Well, it is what it says, hybrid. It's the middle ground. Uh, it has dedicated services for you under long-term agreements. So sometimes that is a benefit if you can get a long-term agreement. I'm going to have my material stored there. You're going to hold it for me. You're going to have it ready for me when I want it. Uh, and It's usually less expensive than a private, but it provides more control than public warehouse, because public sometimes you cannot say absolutely I'm going to get this square footage. But when you set a contract, you can set that contract and say I'm going to have 500,000 square foot at the 610 location, and it's going to be there all the time whether I use it or not. Sometimes you get that at a lower cost depending on how availability is around you know the region, and you can have more control, and it's usually long term. It works well for oil and gas industry because a lot of our contracts are 2 years out, 2 to 5 years out. So a lot of times you can say, okay, I know I'm going to have this much, the need for this much space. It did have some challenges when we had downturns, but what it does, it takes you hire a specialist to take care of it for you. So if you're good at building downhole testing devices, or deep sea drilling, you're like, okay, let's focus on that, and then we're going to just ship it off, and it's going to sit for a year somewhere else, and they're going to be the ones keeping it high and dry and safe and ready to deliver. There are a few different ways to approach this. Contract warehousing sometimes can be less expensive, but a lot of times you pay people to handle the headaches for you. So just keep that in mind. And one more. This is pretty much the one that's some companies may or may not prefer it. I've used a multi-client warehousing a couple times. It's shared by different partners, where you're filling up the space for the owner who's going to manage it for you. It's got a lot of elements of public warehousing. So if you're all aligned, like in the same industry, or sometimes they may be a supplier for you, that's beneficial. And we've been in a position where three of our suppliers and Schlumberger all work together to use a warehouse. It was a multi-client warehouse, and it made it very useful for us because they delivered all these products, which essentially were going to end up coming to us on our side, our manufacturing center. But their products were there, so if we needed something, we could immediately get it transferred to our side of the warehouse and get it in our hands. A lot easier than placing an order sometimes and have it shipped. You could just move it across the warehouse in a forklift. It made a big difference. And then we handle the cost of delivery to our manufacturing center. Uh, and it works pretty good. If you've got a steady flow, you don't see a lot of fluctuation. Uh, it works pretty good and it's not high volume. That's when these work out well. And if they, like we notice about the shared transportation routes, or we call them milk runs, right? Where a pickup and delivery may go to four of our manufacturing centers for Schlumberger, but also those four suppliers, or two or three suppliers who are coming out of the same location, would all ship and put it on the same milk run. It saves transportation costs, where we can consolidate some of that, and you get a cost savings. It's usually a little more complex, but you can work that out with planning, and be successful. So as we move on, we know the types of warehouses we're looking at, and then you say, well, okay, well, I want to design one. How do you design one? Even when in each types of these warehouses, you need to have a proper warehouse design. Uh, so what do you consider, when you're designing a warehouse? I don't know. What's it going to be used for? Do we care if it really looks nice? What do we want to have going on? What are the conditions of the environment where we're building? So sometimes it's about these kinds of trade-offs, between space, labor, mechanization, and that's an interesting one. How automated are we going to have our facility? And quick question, think about it. What type of facility would we be designing? Is it, if we're are we going to design a public? Not likely. Private, yes. Might be able to design the multi-client even, depending on who is the biggest shareholder in the facility. And you always want to look about how you're building it, what's going to happen, the accessibility, the routes between the trucks coming in and out, the routes before the movement of material in and out uh, of the building. How do they move across the aisles? How do they move in the warehouse space internally? What other things do you have to look for? Uh, there's do we need to be ready for what are the safety hazards? What kind of products do we intend to store here? And how can we design that properly? I was part of the North American distribution center design and layout team with Halliburton, and we had to take a lot of consideration in the space for what we were doing. And we said, well, if we have surges of the hazmat, it's oil and gas. Imagine that. That you may have to say, I need our capacity to be double what it is normally for these surges, or we're going to have to find an alternate route, an alternate way to store this material, especially if it's hazardous. And the one thing to take into consideration is, hey, if it's a distribution center, we want it to move fast. And are we going to have a hybrid environment of how we're using this, where maybe a distribution center and a storage, long-term storage? And when we first set up that distribution center, we saw that kind of problem pop up because they had materials that were on contracts that were 5, 7 years long, and the procurement department got a great deal on this product, so they essentially bought the life of the contract and had it all delivered, which was a problem. We went back and negotiated after the fact because we were like, you're essentially having material delivered that's going to sit for 3 years. So we negotiated where it would sit back at the vendor. But if you really want to keep it, you're going to have to design that out and know your short-term and long-term strategies as a company. So remember, a good design affects efficiency, safety, and cost. A bad design affects that also. You have to decide up front, what ripple effect do you want to have. And then we start looking at, well, what is this? A slotting strategy. Well, that determines how everything's stored. And that's one of the key things in this industry is learning of the terminology. Well, how are they stored? What is the difference? And we say, well, a fixed slot location when you put something up, or a fixed inventory location, right? Uh, it gives predictability, but it does waste space. If you allocate this product can only go here. Okay. Well, what happens when you don't have that much? You're wasting the space. You're not utilizing it effectively. And if you are space constrained, that becomes a problem. And then what you have is the other one is the variable slots. Hey, you can move locations around. Well, what does that give you? Well, it does give you the better space use, but you have to have a really robust inventory system where you can see where stuff moves, especially if you track by lot serial number, or it takes any special storage. You've got to have a good inventory system in place to where you can make sure everything's tracked appropriately and you have good control of those variable slots. And velocity slotting, this is fast movers, right? That's something that you probably want to have at the front or back of your warehouse or distribution center, where it's coming in, it's being laid down, it's being picked up, it's moving quick. It could be in a transit lane or adjacent to a transit lane, so people could come in and pick it up and get it out, in and out. What that does, and it's usually associated with how often, what's the volume, is it cuts down the travel time, right? If you're coming in, putting it in here, and take a few steps, and you grab the next piece and drop it off. It's how much time do you want to spend going to search for products that move very fast? And it's exactly what it is. Velocity is fast movers. Uh, and when you can set it up in that fashion, your labor efficiency will go through the roof, and your order accuracy usually improves greatly. We had a situation at the completion center plant where when we stepped in, the average order pick was 2 weeks for some of the builds, and it was just that complex. It could have been as many as 2,000 parts for these builds, and we're talking about drilling uh, devices, and I'm gonna say I forget the name, forgive me, but it could be about 2,000 pieces. And what we noticed from the time studies when I walked in the door was 2 weeks, and I was like, oh my God! And I started looking. I put a spaghetti map together for picking a few orders, and the labor was all over the warehouse. So it being 2 weeks to pick everything, and some of these pieces could be as small as a capacitor or a wire or or an O-ring, and some could be as large as a 20-foot cylinder. So what we looked at it, we said, well, why is this laid out this way? And it was kind of because they had a variable slot locations in place, but they weren't tracking it very well, and so they just started putting material wherever there was open space. Because it wasn't planned and laid out very good. So we put together a project, and we streamlined it. So we cut we thought we were doing pretty good, and we cut it down to 2 days. But we kept refining and looking at how we could improve this, and we got to the slotting and kitting approach. So it came in the door. We was allocated to what order it went to. So it was kitted as soon as it came in the door. And what we ended up being is cutting to, from the time the planner released work orders, the manufacturing planner released work orders, we could have it delivered to the manufacturing floor within 2 hours. And usually, when it had to follow the motto of everything's here. We didn't we had that negotiation with them about you're not going to release a work order if we don't have all the material. And that was another problem. It was an in-depth study that we found out all the root causes. There were quite a few that were creating this 2-week lead time for picking orders out of the warehouse. So when we made the efficiencies, put them in place, it was literally 2 hours. And with the pre-kitting process, we started getting to where the manufacturing teams couldn't keep up with the warehouse teams. And I was very happy with that because we had taken a lot of abuse for never being able to deliver when they needed, that they were sitting in the manufacturing center with nothing to do because they were waiting on product. So once we got to that step, we were like, okay, we created a better process, and we'll cover more of those kind of topics as we move forward through the classes. And then here's the other option: build up versus build out. You know, and you think about, well, why build up? If you've ever been to some of the larger manufacturing centers, they may have a 20-foot high racks where they're built, and that's building up, right? And usually that's cheaper than expanding the footprint because land costs money, and building a facility on that land costs money. So that's where we start looking at, hey, we've got the land, we've got the property, let's build a bigger warehouse, let's build up. And there's just some of the things going to it says, height lowers the cubic foot cost, but it raises equipment costs, because you're going to need equipment to get high, and it's going to be able to work properly, especially if you have heavy equipment. And that also affects how are you planning to where are you going to put material. Start high, come down. So when you're getting the heaviest things or largest things, they're lower, they're easier, they're safer, and you can make things happen. And as we said, specialized forklifts, well, they cost a little more. But it's when you equal it all out, uh, building up is usually more cost effective than building out 90% of the time. And when you're building up, and you also got to look at this, you may be put in a situation where you have to get smaller aisles, and just typically the aisle width, it impacts productivity because narrow aisles, they you can increase storage up usually by about a quarter of what you had before, but you're going to need more of those specialized forklifts or aisle rangers as we used to call them, and they're costly, but usually the end use, if you lay out your warehouse properly, you put it to where they could start picking and come down an aisle and be finished by that at the end of the aisle. You're not going to be going backwards very much. And if you go forward all the time, you'll be successful and more efficient and more effective. There are a lot of considerations, because outside of just the cost, you know, safety comes into consideration because some of these the training has to be improved. You to make sure you get your operators where they're not being unsafe with how they're operating this different equipment, which is non-standard. But it's impressive, and it drives up productivity pretty much most of the time. The other thing to look at outside of aisle size, the forklift, is the automation in the warehousing. So, oh well, how can we do that? We covered RFIDs, the AGVs, and but one thing is robotic picking. It can do a lot if you set it up properly. Especially if you have a palletized warehouse, you can program an aisle ranger to go to certain locations and pick up product. Now it's a little bit more of a challenge to get the kind of robotic picking where it'll go grab a box off a pallet. That's a little different. There's a little more increased cost there, but it's usually for narrow aisle forklifts, to do robotic picking. It cuts labor costs and it boosts productivity. But you also have to put your product up a certain way. It has to be packaged a certain way, and of course, you have to label it properly so the robot finds it. And it's the implementation cost is high, and if you're going from paper to a robotic warehouse, it's very disruptive. You've got a lot of training to cover. But when you look at automation, you need to make sure that it solves the real problems that are aligned with your strategy. So there's a because don't just get it because it's fancy, but make sure it serves your long-term strategy and goals. Because that's what you see right now, especially in the Amazon warehouse. They're transforming modern warehouses where you have R2 units moving product all over the warehouse and picking product. Very little intervention, mainly oversight from humans. So it's got to match your strategy as a company. Not many companies, you have to have huge volumes and it has to pay for itself. So take that into consideration when you want to say, I want to automate. You have to figure out what type of automation works best for you. And the other things that, we're like, hey, what other space things should we consider? Well, is it warehouse space or is it storage? Like I mentioned before, we had an unfortunate incident where we had to store material for years when we were designed to move it in 48 hours. So it created some problems. And we said, okay, well, and we look at velocity, how we set it up velocity. What do we have it set up? Are you going to have staging areas? driver waiting areas for when products brought down. I've seen that with automation, where when we're loading into the truck, if it's a human loading truck, a lot of times I have to wait for the product to get there. Then we have to transition it from the robotic picker to what is applicable to someone on a forklift. And there's always all kinds of hazards you may see. A pallet may need repair, a pallet may have gotten damaged, and that's where the human oversight is very frequent, because they may not notice they're dragging a pallet with a piece with three pieces of wood hanging off the bottom, and but humans are more keen at that kind of observation, and may say, well, maybe we're going to need different types of pallets, and again, that incurs cost, right? And are we going to have special pallets for hazardous goods to prevent spills, to ensure there are no leaks? So all those are cost considerations you have to put in, for special handling. And you have to design all these needs. You have to keep in mind that your overall goal is smoother operations, and you don't want bottlenecks, because bottlenecks are where stuff doesn't happen, stuff's not moved, and the primary focus in setting these up is make product get it to the right place, get it to the right customer, and make sure it's moved properly and safely. So there's a lot of things to take into consider when you say, what other space considerations do I need to look at? And then we say, here's the key thing, right? Productivity. What's our productivity analysis? Well, productivity is equal to the output divided by the input, measured in cases, pallets, or lines per worker. Depending on the KPIs or metrics you put in place, you have to say, what do I want to get out of it to say we're being productive, right? So a lot of times you may find a competitor, or a partner who's you doing some of the same tasks you're doing. You say, well, let's benchmark against the industry standards, so we can see what our gaps are. Hey, let's go look at what FedEx does. Let's go look at what UPS does. Hey, let's go visit the Compact Computer, I guess they're HP now, facility, and see what they're doing. Because a lot of times you may see the gaps, and it's not always technology gaps. Sometimes it's like, wow, they've got clear labeling about what's good and what's bad, how is it picked up, and what needs to be moved, and what's ready to be moved, and what's staged, and setting up layouts appropriately. So that's that's very important. Like, we had staging areas that were blocked into 24 zones, so it was loaded onto a container that may be having multiple shipments or multiple stops, and some things are going to have to be unloaded while the rest and some other material may be reloaded at other spots on the milk runs that I mentioned earlier. And so, you may have to lay that up and reorganize the staging areas. And when you do that, you're going to increase efficiency in the long run. There's a little bit of a headache on the setup, but they're not things that are game changers. It's not going to take a big investment, but hey, let's make this work a little differently. And you'll find throughout the design and layout that some of the most mundane things will make someone's life better. For instance, like we had on the production line, every time there was a stop or an issue at the Daikin facility, the Disney song "It's a Small World After All" would start to play. And that was always like, well, okay, we know where that's coming from. So it would be kind of interesting to hear the music, and you say, oh, that line's having problems, let's go see what we can do to help. Or they've got a problem in one specific area, maybe in the quality area. Like, one of them had the little rubber tree plant, and I was like, I said, oh wow, that was a quality area. I always chuckled with that, because whenever they had an issue, that song would come on and everyone knew to go to the quality area, who was responsible for solving those problems. So that's why I say it could be small improvements, or just very, very insignificant that you may think of, that make productivity improve. and it's measured in output per input. So you can decide that in cases, pallets, line items, per worker or per work cell. So keep that in mind when you're trying to do productivity analysis, and your benchmarking highlights. It really needs to be set to say what are the gaps. Where are we doing? You can say what are we doing good that we want to do better. Can we identify gaps, or what are we doing bad that we know we're doing bad? But don't go in with the approach I'm gonna build Rome in a day. Well, okay, let's build the road to Rome sometimes. Or let's just build the aqueduct. None of those were still built in a day, but they also were taking a different approach. They were building the civilization, and you're building a warehouse that works effectively. So reorganizing layout, adding one or two steps, taking one or two steps away from an employee or from a warehouse coordinator who's you can say, hey, well, we just took away two steps on every transaction. Over time, his efficiency will increase, and you can do that at every step, every operator, every task, every handoff. Uh, you'll make a big difference. You'll see some big increases, and these all go into the considerations for how do I design a warehouse? What do I need to think about when I get down to warehouse management? Right? It's not all just moving material. You got to figure out how you're going to build it, how you're going to lay it out, what's long-term strategy, short-term, what do you want to do in the next 3-6 months, 3-6 10 years. Where do you want to be? What do you want to see happen? What technology we need to build into the infrastructure to be successful. And additionally on that, it's safety concerns, right? Safety is it's a big concern. We need to be aware of that every step of the way. And matter of fact, warehousing is hazardous. Forklifts alone cause many injuries and deaths every year. And OSHA has several recommendations that are simple measures, right? Like no dock jumping, safe driving, clean floors, forklifts that shut off when there's not a body in them, that you can't put it in gear without a seatbelt on and a person in the seat. So there's a lot of things that happen, removing obstacles off the floor, and the easy employee training, back support awareness. How do you manage your waste? Are we effectively cleaning as we go, or are we letting stuff pile up and dragging it all out at the end of the day? That affects a lot of other things like fire prevention, imagine, and compliance issues with safety and hazardous. So, and all this in the end saves lives. And we talk about saving lives. We need to look at one important thing, right? Hazardous materials. That's one of the things that safety we have to be very aware of. What type of hazards are you having at the workplace? Which ones require extra caution? Are we doing everything we can to make sure our safety data sheets are available to everyone and updated consistently, regularly? And in case of an accident, are we making sure that everyone knows where to get to them? For hazard areas, storage areas, that we got the right ventilation, sprinklers, and containment systems in place, right? Those are things that are very important. For instance, do we have a berm for we have spills of some of these hazardous materials, so we make sure it doesn't get into the waterways? Are we preventing that? If we have those berms, are they draining properly? And do we have water overflow areas? We had some challenges with that, with some material we were storing outside. We had a berm that was about a foot high, but we had heavy rains one day, and all of a sudden I said, wait, what's going on out there? And we had to go out there and said, okay, where's it draining to? So we had to make sure the drains that all that water was going to on the overflow, that it wasn't getting into the regular the city systems. Unfortunately, when we built that facility, it had its own water treatment for anything that came from the center. So it kind of the first scare for me was, hey, water's going into the public water supply, and then I called our safety person. And he came out and he was like, "Oh no, Daniel, everything comes through our own treatment center before we put it out." And I said, "Okay, thank you." And I said, "Because this is a hazardous material that we have that could cause problems." I learned something that day. But a lot of those things you need to take in consideration when you build the facility, because when we built that distribution center, that I do not recall that being discussed, but because of the site we were on, that had already been considered, and so that was a good thing. I said, "Oh, lesson learned for next checklist." And remember, regulations, they're the minimum. They're not the maximum, because we had done everything to meet the minimum regulations, and still we ran into a lot of opportunities where we said we're going to go a little bit further and make sure we're safer than that. And we got compliments when we had our inspections from the fire marshal and the city. They came out and were like, "Oh, y'all did a great job. This is above and beyond what we usually see happening." And but Halliburton had been involved in some other high visible issues, and so they were like, "When we build this center, we're going to make sure there's nothing that's going to make us look bad in the future." And so we just kept moving forward. And then, in addition to hazards, you need to look at warehousing security, right? These are things when you're setting up management, or even if you take over existing warehouse, the security needs to be considered. Because these risks include theft, pilferage, fire, vandalism. Uh, you know, and when you're saying, well, what can we stop? What are threats? Well, prevention involves people, the facilities, and processes. One of the things that always starts with, strong hiring practices. You hiring the right people. Are you getting the people in your facility and on your campus that are there to do the job with a focus on being successful, right? And you put in surveillance cameras. That's pretty standard nowadays on the facility. And you may have it where they're obvious, and you may have it to where they're not as conspicuous. So you can keep an eye on product. And a lot of it is, one thing you want to do for warehouse security, you limit the handling as much as possible. So that's one of the key focus for efficiency and warehouse management. You don't want to have to put a product in the warehouse and move it 10 times. If you have to store it, you want to put it there once and move it when it leaves the building. You want to have that shipment handling to be as little as possible. One example is the pharma industry. They had pharmaceutical theft in 2010 was $80 million. And this was it was poor security basically in place that contributed to those losses. One pill here, one pill there, 1 2 1 2 1 2. Next thing you know, that adds up considerably. And we all know the cost of medication. So one of the things that they put in place were some automated pharmacists, right? And you may have seen those in certain stores, or they put tighter security controls on how product is delivered, and packaged. So it's not as much where they have to break down. They used to get a big bottle of pills of product and separate it, but there was a lot of theft going on, or issues, loss. So there have been a lot of things put in place in that industry to control that. And that's what happens in warehouses. One specific example I can talk to is we had this Inconel metal, which we used for downhole testing devices. And we would bring it in, and I think at that time it was $1,000 a foot. Uh, and we consumed a lot of it. And when we looked at it, we saw losses I was like, wow, we should use a lot of this product. What do we do with the scrap? We're leftover. And and they were like, well, we throw it away. And I was like, what do you mean you throw it away? There's a recovery cost we can get on this. And when we looked at it closely, I was like, well, okay, well, where is it put? They said, oh, they put it in the bin back in the corner. And I said, oh, really? And I walked over there and there was nothing in there. And I was like, oh, this is odd. Uh, so I called security and had a camera put up to watch that bin because I didn't doubt that our manufacturing team was putting all the excess product in that area because we had shavings, all kinds of things. And during that just review, when we looked at it, we caught several employees just walking in, getting, you know, bars of Inconel and putting it in their backpack and walking off the facility. I mean, regularly. Uh, and so, you know, we did the right thing. We announced to everybody that was inappropriate behavior. Uh, and we put some other processes in place to where we could track it. And the pilfering stopped. And it became a net benefit when we took that material and sold it as scrap Inconel. We turned around and started making $1.5 million consistently every month on the product that was just walking out the door with employees. Uh, and that was a shock to everybody because they never realized that much was walking out the door. There were a lot of people working there. A lot of people were taking advantage of that lapse. You know, we did see within a few months, people still trying to take it, and they were addressed appropriately. And some of the quality of the cars in the parking lot started to change after that because you know, they never tied it to who had been taking it. And then we went and did investigation with local scrap buyers, and we started identifying people who had been selling large volumes of Inconel that were our employees. And you know, we took the actions in place to make sure those were addressed. But those are some security concerns you may not even be aware of because people do this out of just habit, and there's nothing wrong with it. I've got some other examples on security of a product that are quite interesting. And of course, this is always the most thing. You know, when we talked about aesthetics earlier, we say, oh, the cleanliness and the sanitation, right? We want to keep that in place. We want to make sure everything looks good, right? Everything is clean. Uh, you know, some of the security risks we're talking about, they include theft, pilferage, fire, vandalism, and you know, so okay, well, prevention involves people, facilities, processes, hiring processes, and you know, the surveillance. So we want to keep all these things in mind as we say, what do we need to have for safety, morale, food, pharma. What can we have? Those are important because you don't want people getting cuts if they're handling food, if they're handling pharmaceuticals or products that go inside a person's body. How can we keep people motivated? And regular cleaning schedules. You know, there are habits. Some companies believe we're going to stop and clean at certain times. Some take the Toyota model. We're going to clean as we go. You know, we're constantly going to keep our environment the best so we know when something's out of place, something's missing. It is obvious. It's visually easy to identify. And if you do it as you're working, you'll see the benefits. Some environments they can't do it as they're working, so they may have to say we're going to have to stop and make sure it's done at the end of the day or before we hand off shifts. And this is one of the things that we've done in the past. And you can consider it. Hey, you're the team. This is your work area, and we would usually get everyone up and say we're proud of where we work, and they keep it clean. They do audits on each other. They make sure that throughout the day they support each other to keep their work area clean and safe and visible. It looks good. And when you get this culture of cleanliness, you know, that's one of the key things, especially in a big distribution center. Uh, everyone just likes working there, and everyone works together to keep that going that way, and you start seeing real benefits in efficiency, productivity, morale. Everybody likes working, and the place is clean because it makes you feel good. Uh, so at least that's the experience I've had. I've never been in an environment where if it's dirty, dungy, and hot, and there are hazards everywhere because people don't clean, no one's usually happy being there. But if it is clean and neat, people will stop and say, "Let me pick this up. Let me not walk past it. Let me take care of this," because it's taking care of their business. And if you take care of your business takes care of you. So here we go. Hey, we're all loaded up and moving out. Galveston College transit truck is there. It's ready. It's got a full load of knowledge. So remember that destination is to where it's going to take you, but you're loaded with the knowledge. So remember, warehousing it balances production, consumption, and enables efficient flow of goods. Facility types. You got to find the facility type that meets your need. You focus on the design trade-offs. And, look at, do you need automation, or is it just the latest bell and whistle that you want to put in front of somebody? Make sure safety's there because it impacts everyone's performance. So keep all these things in mind. As Warehousing is it's not just storage. It's moving product, making sure it's done right, and it's one of the key strategic elements of logistics. An army doesn't move if it's not fed, and warehouse management is the kitchen, and make sure manufacturing is fed, make sure the customer is fed, and you want to get everything in to that kitchen safe and stored right, the right temperature, so when you get it delivered, it doesn't make anybody unhappy. So that's the summary for Chapter 10. If you have any questions, let's roll through it, and we're gonna have a great remaining part of the semester as we cover a few of the last topics and get ready for the next adventure. So take care and have a great day. As always, if you have questions, reach out to me. Ask the questions. Ask the question of each other. Challenge each other. Challenge me. Let's make the introduction to materials handling and logistics and safety this semester all successful. Thank you.